Underneath the lantern by the barrack gate, a cafe in Belgium filled with British airmen, its owner having an affair with his waitress. Hang on though, that was in France, wasn't it? Not Belgium, Nouvion. That must mean we're not talking Allo Allo, but Secret Army.
You stupid woman.
In their book TV Heaven, Sangster and Condon call Secret Army the single greatest popular drama series ever produced by the BBC, which deserves to be seen by everyone who enjoys quality television programming. The Guinness Book of Classic British TV said Secret Army has lost little of its pace and tension, the strength of the performances and the quality of much of the writing still shining through, noting that many claimed it as the best ever example of the ongoing drama serial. But is it that good? Let's have a look. Secret Army was producer Gerard Glaister's follow-up to Colditz and ran for 3 series on BBC One between 1977 and 1979. It followed the activities of Lifeline, a Belgian resistance organisation which guided downed Allied airmen back to Blighty during World War II, and was based on real-life organisations which did just that, such as the Comet Line. The main focus for the series was Lisa Colbert, a young nurse who founded the line, played by Jan Francis. Inspired by real-life escape line leaders such as André de Jong, Lisa went by the codename Yvette. Christopher Neame was British agent John Curtis, who begins as the male lead, sent by his SOE boss Anthony Ainley to assist the Belgians. It becomes clear fairly quickly that he's surplus to requirements, and the story of the Belgian resistance is interesting enough without him.
You people give me a pain! You're the most miserable, cunning, suspicious shard I've ever come across.
Yes, I've noticed you prefer the French.
The real star of the series was Bernard Hepton as Albert. Hepton played the camp commandant in Colditz, but was on the other side of the war here. Although Lisa was ostensibly the leader of Lifeline, it was clear by the end of Series 1 that Albert was the dominating character, often disobeying her orders and carrying out the dirty work required to maintain their cover. Albert owned the Café Candide. This was the base of operations. He was also having an affair with his waitress Monique, whilst his disabled wife, André, lay in a bedroom above the cafe.
Get rid of Monique, that's all she ever says. And Monique wants me to leave her. How can you leave a chronic invalid?
The Lifeline team were rounded out with Natalie Chantron, played by Juliet Hammond-Hill, who led the airmen from Brussels to Spain.
Do we have any choice?
No.
And by radio's man in black himself, Valentine Dial as Dr. Pascal Keldemans. Crucially, for a war series, the Germans were portrayed as realistically as the Belgians, although it's clear throughout that we're on the Belgian side. The Germans were represented by 2 main characters, both signifying different sides of their national psyche. Gestapo officer Sturmbannführer Kessler is responsible for tracking resistance activities and appears to be a typical, ruthlessly efficient German officer. He frequently breaks the Geneva Convention in order to obtain information from civilians or captured British agents.
She was nervous. She did not see the ambulance.
She had no need to be afraid. The questioning was to be only a formality.
You do not know, sir, the terror you inspire.
Oh, I do, Baji. I do.
His counterpart is Luftwaffe officer Major Brandt, responsible for dealing with any captured airmen, with a much more humane approach to his work. At times, Brandt is almost charming, keen to maintain law and order and treat his fellow enemy officers well. Brandt is from old German aristocratic stock, whereas Kessler is one of the new breed of triumphant National Socialists. Kessler committed to the Nazis, Brandt committed to the Luftwaffe.
The Kesslers of this world don't like the military class, and never have. You afraid of him?
I'm wary of him, yes.
And yet he represents Germany today. Not me, not you, him. Gestapo, the SS.
The two grind along in an awkward relationship, though gain a grudging, if wary, respect for each other. When Brandt's family are killed in a later episode and the calm, collected Major loses his composure and batters the Allied airmen who may have dropped the bomb, We realise then things are getting serious. Kessler though. Kessler is one of the great creations of British television. From his opening scene, he is a force to be reckoned with, a complex, terrifying, fascinating man played powerfully and totally by Clifford Rose. Throughout, the civilians of Lifeline are sure to be in significantly more danger than any of the captured RAF officers, with torture or death their sentence of course. Secret Army succeeds so well because it shows the difficult decisions taken by those at war and the constant threat they lived under during a time of occupation. Like many continuing dramas of the era, it excels in morality plays, stories which question the viewer's resolve and mettle. In one episode, genial Yorkshireman Paul Copley plays a genial Yorkshire airman, shot down and found by Lifeline. He states that he only wants to leave the war behind and flee to neutral Switzerland.
I'm not going back. I won't. I am scared, I acknowledge that. But so's everyone else, me no more than the others. That's not the reason, I told you.
Look, any man who doesn't want to get out of a war has to be enjoying it. Some do, I know that. But most don't. Most are frightened and sick, just like you.
Albert takes on his case and betrays him to the Germans. Lifeline's business is returning airmen to Britain to continue the war, not nursing deserting airmen and handing in a fugitive to Kessler aids the Café Condi's cover.
We tipped them off about an enemy airman in this restaurant. That makes us loyal.
Collaborators.
Well, call it what you like. I know what we're doing. I thought you did.
And our neighbours?
What do you want? Is it real help we're prepared to give, or just a rude gesture that earns us a sly pat on the back? We're closed! Can't you read?
In production terms, the series is shot with a mix of film location work in both Belgium and England, often standing in for Belgium, and videotaped studio sessions. There were occasional issues. It had apparently escaped the production team's notice that decking Brussels Grand Place out with swastikas and other Nazi paraphernalia without telling the locals, and only 30 years after the Germans had left, might cause problems. But many who were involved in wartime activities praised the series for its accuracy. The series title sequence was designed by Alan Jeeps, later to do EastEnders, and is one of its more memorable features. Coupled with Robert Farnan's ominous music, the titles slowly zoom into a series of photographs of the countryside, representing the path that evaders had to take back to Britain. By Series 2, Jan Francis was gone, ironically killed off in a pre-filmed location sequence by Allied bombs, so she didn't have to come to the studio recordings.
Ironic, isn't it? Killed by the very people for whom she was risking her life.
Curtis was gone too, his position no longer required among a team working powerfully without him. Albert moves to new premises, the Restaurant Candide in Brussels Grand Place, and there's constant tension now that the Germans are frequently visiting the restaurant, little realising it was secretly bought by the Allies for Albert to continue his activities. Lifeline are a group openly denigrated by the Belgians for appearing to be collaborators, while secretly being the key driving force, getting Allied airmen back to Blighty. The series humanises Kessler by giving him a love interest with lonely society lady Madeline.
What?
Kessler is no longer merely an inhuman monster. He's a man, choosing to take the actions he does, and he believes he's doing the right thing for the right reasons, which is far more terrifying. The series also positions him as a counterpoint to Albert. Kessler, the Nazi, is unfailingly kind to his lover, whereas Albert, the resistance fighter, is generally awful to his.
Can you do it?
Yes.
Clifford Rose and Hazel McBride play their parts marvellously, drawing out our sympathies of this unfailingly polite, in his private life, ruthless killer in his professional one. In one episode, Albert is invited to a garden party by Kessler, keen to appear to be on the German side of the conflict in order to protect Lifeline. He attends, mingles, is given a drink, then is horrified as several Belgian prisoners are brought out to stakes at the bottom of the garden and shot.
You see, Monsieur Foy? All these people watching so intently, all trying to mask their fears, all wondering possibly if one of the men to be executed has betrayed them in some way, all guilty of some act, some indiscretion, something treasonable perhaps, they do not remember. I find it most revealing. Not an ideal day for a garden party.
Entsichern! Der Führer befiehlt es! Gebt Feuer!
The undercurrent of the season is of rumours of a plot against Hitler's life, von Stauffenberg's 20th of July plot. Meyer Brandt becomes tangentially aware of this via an acquaintance and decides not to take part.
Manfred, I envy your certainty, and I wish I could share it. But you're asking me to join in a conspiracy against the Fuhrer himself.
It was bad enough when he was no more than an upstart. Now it's apparent the man is a criminal lunatic. Don't you understand that?
He is still our head of state.
And itself enough to shame any decent man.
Oh, come along. Do the Ukrainians love Stalin?
When the plot is uncovered and his name surfaces in the investigation of it, he is forced to commit suicide.
This concerns you. It's from Berlin, Prince Albrechtstrasse. Before he died, under interrogation, Oberst Neidlinger implicated Meyer Brandt Luftwaffe in the plot against the Führer. I'm sorry, Brandt. Truly I am.
The great Michael Culver went off to do Shakespeare and The Empire Strikes Back. Those were separate productions, but was fortunately replaced for season 3 by the equally great Terence Hardiman as Reinhardt. There's also a rival enemy for Lifeline, the communist resistance, who are seeking to take over the escape line. Albert continues his uncompromising leadership by tipping off the Germans about the communists once he identifies their mole within Lifeline. It's TV Stephen Yardley. The second and third series were bolstered by developments to Monique's character.
We said when we started our story.
Angela Richards began writing songs which she would sing in the restaurant Candide, mixing them alongside German standards like Lily Marlene. It's again a technique to flesh out different elements of a character. The downtrodden waitress, the steely resistance fighter, and the sultry lounge singer. And then, in the third series, it gets mental. In short, the communists want revenge on Albert for tipping off the Nazis about their resistance in Series 2, so they claim to the Germans that he murdered his wife in Series 1, at which point he is locked up in prison and only appears in pre-filmed sequences because Bernard Hepburn was away doing Julius Caesar at Tufnell Park. Albert is replaced temporarily by British agent Nick Bradley, played by Paul I Should Have Been James Bond Shelley, who falls in love with Natalie but eventually dies. Panic and chaos ramps up as the Allies approach Brussels and the Germans retreat. As the war ends and the resistance achieves its aims, Monique grows frustrated with Albert, realising he only really cares about money, and starts a relationship with Allied officer Captain Stephen Durnford. Albert's happy when the Allies cede him the deeds to his restaurant. Kessler escapes with Madeline, shooting a fellow officer in the face to steal his identity, and lives to survive for another day and a sequel series. The third series allowed Monique and Natalie to come into their own. The enforced absence of Albert showed they could step up to the mark with just as much fire and influence as he had. It's a feminist series in many ways. The women know what they have to do and they do it. On top of that, after 3 series of Albert and Monique's strangely loveless affair, Monique's decision to have a happy ending with someone else is crucial. Like the war itself, the assumption is that they're fighting for things to be different, and Monique chooses this on Liberation Day. In the last episode, she says a tearful goodbye to Albert as she marries her generic Allied officer.
Before you go,
Will you sing for us? Please.
I know.
Yes, of course I will. If this is the last time I see you, then let's make the most of today. Let promises keep for tomorrow, when you will be far away. If this is the last time you hold me, then hold me as never before. We said when we started our story, the future we just ignore while I'm here.
The most harrowing sequence perhaps occurs to Meyer Brandt's replacement Reinhardt. Having identified Albert as the leader of Lifeline, he refuses to arrest him, aware that the Allied liberation is approaching. As he's imprisoned in an internment camp with Kessler, Kessler is appalled at this and arranges a summary court-martial for him in the camp after the war has ended. The Allies find no legal reason for it not to go ahead, and Reinhardt, his war over, is shot for assisting the enemy. He's still a German, he's still the enemy, but as a man with some measure of dignity and sense of fair play, it's a pointless, final act of madness.
By order of Oberstwald Schalk, Meyer Hans-Dietrich Reinhardt has been found guilty of treasonable conduct against the German armed forces and is sentenced to death by firing squad. Mayor Reinhardt, have you anything you wish to say?
You're mad. All of you. Stark raving mad.
There was a final episode set years later called What Did You Do in the War, Daddy?, with the team reviewing their actions for a modern-day television documentary, but it remained unbroadcast. It's generally supposed it was suppressed because of an anti-communist stance which suggested that resistance to the Nazis had been a distraction from the real enemy. There was a brief Kessler spin-off set in South America years after the war and covering many of the themes of the unbroadcast last episode. Glaister went on to make The Fourth Arm and then Howard's Way. As every review of Secret Army has to mention, the series was the inspiration for Croft and Lloyd's sitcom Allo Allo, even down to the set design and costumes. And in many ways it came to overshadow it. But as it's so well done, we don't really mind.
You stupid woman!
In its portrayal of realistic life under occupation and the struggles of a resistance fighting clandestinely against it, Secret Army succeeds in creating an atmosphere of distrust and determination through the use of a handful of sets, a little bit of location filming and some remarkable writing and performances. It's about how people react when they're scared for their lives, how they face death. Moral conflicts litter each episode, and it's impossible to watch without wondering what you'd do in the same situations. Would you stay quiet, live an oppressed life while your country suffers, or somehow find like-minded people and create your own escape line right from Brussels to the Pyrenees? I know what I'd do. Lifeline members are captured and killed, regulars die, friends become traitors, characters engage in conversations where both know the other is lying, and good guys commit murder to secure their safety. It's one of the few series where you don't know if the goodies will win, even knowing that the war is won by the Allies. The performances are given time to breathe in the multi-camera environment of BBC TV's centre, and something magical is created. It perhaps appears relentlessly grim, but there's lightness of touch, and the rare moments of happiness stand out all the brighter. Continuing series of this nature are sometimes seen as production line television, and it couldn't be further from the truth. The artistry involved in making 13 thematic dramas a year and making them good is remarkable and required a team at the height of their powers. It's a series whose second series is better than its first and whose third series is better than its second. It's an unmissable piece of television. Is it the best television series ever made? Well, it's a daft question, isn't it? It depends by what metric you use, how you weight different aspects of the series, and where it sits in the context of the day and of genre and of history. But for a television drama series produced by skilled people telling stories of emotional, historical and epic importance, it will always be Secret Army, the best television series ever made. And remember the actor Ron Pember.